Let's talk about something interesting today. Let's talk about learned behavior. Let's talk about learned behavior. We did an episode before the Ordinary People podcast. We did Family Feud before, and we talked about relatives. We talked about the fact that how relatives come to your repast, your wedding reception, your barbecue, never bring anything, but always leaving with a bunch of plates, always leaving with a bunch of drinks, always sitting at your wedding reception, talking about how many years you're going to be married, betting on it, showing up at your repast, eating, taking plates, but never bringing anything. And as we did that episode, one of the supporters of the show, long-term listeners, mentioned something to me. He's like, well, what about learned behavior? What if these relatives do this because their aunt and uncle always showed up at barbecues, their mom and dad always showed up, never brought anything, but always left with something? What if that's the reason they actually behave that way? What if it's just learned behavior? Let's start thinking, it's very interesting. It's an interesting point. And why is it an interesting point? Because I had a 2-hour debate with older gentlemen about this very particular subject, how older people, our parents and stuff, play a huge role into the things we do today. This is something a lot of older people don't want to hear, don't want to see, and don't want to say, because nobody wants to take responsibility for when something goes wrong. No, I don't want no responsibility for that. Don't blame me for what Generation X or the millennials are doing. No, that has nothing to do with me. I was a perfect generation. Nothing ever went wrong. Yeah, okay. Anyway, let's get right into this. After talking to the supporter and reading the email, I started thinking, like, when my kids are at the park playing, I noticed something. They play with Caucasian kids, Asian kids, Latino kids. Play with all these different kids, black kids. Don't know these kids, never seen them before, don't know their name, don't care. They run around playing, having a great time together. Having a great time, don't know each other. They're not worried about what kind of sneakers each one of them have on. They're not worried about their clothes. Not worried about their hair texture, the color of their skin. They're not worried about anything. Only thing they're worried about is having fun. And I notice the kids never feel uncomfortable when they're at the park playing. But then I notice, and I just glance at how the parents' faces look. You see, the kids are never uncomfortable playing each other, despite their race, despite their class, their gender. They're never uncomfortable, but the parents are always uncomfortable. What does this have to do with learned behavior? It has everything to do with learned behavior, because when we talk about racism, and don't worry, people, we're not going to do an episode on racism. Now, we'll save that for another day. We'll do that in another show. But for this particular point, let's just touch on racism for a second. So when you think about racism, one of the things that was always said, as long as I've been alive, is racism is taught in the house. And nothing gives me more proof than that than when I go to a park with my children and watch them as they're playing with kids with other races. When they're playing with kids of other genders and other classes, and they don't care about what they look like. They don't care about what their name is. Don't care about where they're from. They're just there to have fun. It just makes me think racism is taught in the house. See, we teach our children how to have racism. So a lot of the behavior we're learning and displaying is behavior that's coming from the people before us. Wow. Isn't that interesting? You gotta look at yourselves one time, just for a second, think about what type of behavior are you passing down to your child. Are you teaching your child to be the type of kid or type of person to go to a barbecue and only eat and never bring anything? To go to a wedding and show them and just talk about people? What type of person are you? Excuse me, I got a little cold. But what type of person are you? What type of behavior are you showing? See, this is the point that I'm making here. The point I'm making here is that we complain about Generation X, the millennials, and how they act, the way they think, but the reality is a lot of times it's the older generations, even my generation, who are promoting these ways of thinking, and we're teaching them. We're teaching them these type of behaviors. We teach people to be racist and to judge people. We teach people how to act a certain way. Think about this, music. Music is a very good example because this is going on throughout the history of music. Ray Charles, when he first started doing music, people used to walk out of the club because they felt that he was doing secular music. Secular means sinful music, that he was taking church music and turning it into a secular world, which means the worldly people. He was making music that was provocative. Then you had Marvin Gaye, who came not too long after, well, a while after, and he came out with Let's Get It On. What is he talking about, Let's Get It On? He talking about fighting? No, he's talking about the whole song is based on sex. And it was based on sex at a time where sexuality was not something that was so present. It wasn't something that was all over TV, all in your face. Sexuality was something that happened behind closed doors, in between married couples. It was something like a secret. So you had the people, older people, who listened to Ray Charles or walked out of the club when Ray Charles was performing, who were saying, how could you listen to Marvin Gaye, this secular type music, this sexual music? Very judgmental of the children after them. Then you had the kids that came after the Marvin Gaye listeners who listened to Silk, who sung let me freak you. The lyrics saying, let me lick you up and down. What about H-Town? Somebody knocking them boots. What you think they're talking about? Talking about sex. Oh my gosh, listen to secular music. These Marvin Gaye listeners are now talking about the secular music you listen to. Now we got the millennials who listen to Rihanna or Chris Brown or any of these new artists, P&B Rock. Listen to these new artists. Oh my gosh, the provocative music, all this cursing they're doing, all the violence in their music. Oh my gosh, it's the worst thing in the world. Yeah, but you was listening to NWA Fuck the Police though, right? But you're judging me because now I'm listening to something P&B Rock or I'm listening to Wiz Khalifa. But that's the interesting thing about learned behavior is that once again we're teaching our children to judge the next generation, to look down on the next generation, to complain about anything the next generation is doing. But we also set in the role for them, the path for them to make the mistakes they make. When you think about gun violence, when you think about all the crimes that's being committed, the sensitivity that people live with, a lot of it is the behavior, the learned behavior that we're passing down to our children. See, as parents, an interesting thing I say to my wife is, and I said to my wife is, as parents, we all strive to be the perfect parent, but don't never understand what it means to be the perfect parent. To me, what it means to be a perfect parent is to actually find balance into the responsibility you take into your child's life. And what do I mean by finding balance and responsibility you take in your child's life? Let me break it down for you real quick, okay? Everybody think about this for a second. Don't we all give ourselves too much responsibility or too much credit for when our child does bad? Think about it. When our child knocks over a liquor store, knocks over an old woman, robs an old woman, steals somebody's purse, have 6 kids by 3 different women or 6 kids by 3 different men, when they drop out of school, don't we give ourselves too much credit for all the mistakes our children make? But then think about this. When our children grow up to be doctors, lawyers, successful members of society, great people, how much credit do we give ourselves in that situation? We give ourselves very little credit for that. We give ourselves very little credit for when our children do good, but give ourselves too much credit for when our children doing bad. And that's what I mean by as parents, we gotta find balance in the way we parent our children and the way we take responsibility. Also into learned behavior, we gotta find balance. Because as much as we want to take credit for the good our children do, or the bad our children do, we got to take credit and responsibility for the good our children do and learn how to balance it. Not judge them based off what they want to listen to, what they're into. See, that's the worst place. That's the worst way to lose somebody is by judging them. Is judging people based off the mistakes they made. We forget the things that we did wrong. So I got 2 kids. I think I told you about this in my last episode. Y'all probably tired of hearing about it, but I'm going to keep talking about my kids because I love my kids. Am I the perfect father? No, absolutely not. Far from perfect. But my children are the best part of my day. It don't matter how my day's going. No matter how many people disrespect me, what somebody say to me, what's going on at work. What's going on with the podcast? It doesn't matter. Because the best part of my day is when I see my children. That smile they give me every day when I pick them up from school, that's the best part of my day. Do my children make bad choices? Absolutely. Some of them bad choices is because I make bad choices, and they're basically just doing learned behavior, things I may do wrong. My youngest son, my 3-year-old, okay? He likes to eat fast. He eats real fast, drinks stuff real fast. And it's learned behavior. It's learned behavior because guess what? I eat real fast. Eat like somebody's going to steal my plate sometimes. My wife be saying to me sometimes, you need to slow down. Like really, you need to digest your food. Do you know even how your food tastes? But my 3-year-old does the same thing. Then he does it. It's learned behavior. And I'm not saying it's a good thing that my 3-year-old eats food. So please calm down, people. Calm down. I'm not saying it's okay. I know I got to change that. We're working on it, okay? But he does it. It's learned behavior. He's doing it because I do it. Or you wonder why your kids be cussing. Your kids cussing because of learned behavior. They're basically mimicking what you see. And it's passing it down. But excuse me if they go their own way. See, a lot of times we judge these kids by the things we see on social media, but I swear I would hate if Twitter, Facebook, and social media was out when my parents were kids my age, or not even my age because I'm getting older now, but teenagers and young adults. Oh my gosh, I don't even want to know what they did. And I'm pretty sure most of us feel that way. Heck, I'm glad social media wasn't out when I was young because the trouble I would have been in. Man, I'm telling you. Thank God cameras wasn't that big back then. That's all I'm going to say. Mom, if you're listening, I was the angel, okay? But seriously. We judge people based on the things we see because it's so apparent now. Everything is so transparent now. You can see everything now. Because of all the cameras and stuff, we can see everything. So it makes it a lot easier to judge people. And we judge our children for what we do. But what we don't realize and what we don't accept is, look, a lot of it's just learned behavior. A lot of it is things that we already did. Things you did growing up. Yeah, you don't want to tell your kids you smoked a little weed behind the gas station or local deli. You don't want to tell your kids you smoked a little weed, you used to sneak out, you used to skip class, you used to drink. You was having sex as a teenager. And I'm not saying it excuses your kids for behaving this way, but you don't want to tell your kids that you did this because, see, you can hide it because there's no evidence of you doing it. But you're quick to judge your children for doing it. And then when your children do it, you be like, oh, where did I go wrong? It's learned behavior. They know what you did. Kids are smarter than you think they are. They know what you're doing. All of it's learned behavior. You sitting there, I always say this. You telling your children not to smoke, but then you blowing smoke in their face. Don't smoke cigarettes, and you take a puff and blow smoke in their face, and then wonder why they're smoking cigarettes. It's learned behavior. They're only doing what they were taught, what they seen you doing. It's learned behavior. A lot of things you see is learned behavior. Now, am I accusing older people for the shootings in schools? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Am I accusing video games, music, and politicians for? Absolutely not. That's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. But has learned behavior played a part in that? Yeah. Yeah. The ugly truth is, yeah. All the violence in the inner city, has learned behavior played a part in that? Yeah. Yeah. Because, I mean, think about it. A lot of the violence is happening in the inner cities because of poverty. But has poverty just begun? Think back to history of not only this country, but other countries like Colombia and all the violence that happened in those countries. I'm going to butcher his name, but the Lavio Lense Day in Colombia, where not the day, but it was a time period where there was a lot of poverty in Colombia and there was a lot of killing. It became so common that the young kids in Colombia found fun by playing with dead bodies. And then the generations that come after them, they become more violent. Why are they becoming so violent? It's because they're mimicking learned behavior. Learned behavior. But just because something began, don't mean it can't be ended. And that's the thing. That's the interesting thing. Just because we make a mistake or we do something wrong, don't mean we can't change it. We can change our behavior. We can change the mistakes. We can change our learned behavior. See, one of the things we think about as older people that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I disagree. I can't teach a VCR how to be a Blu-ray player, but you ain't no Blu-ray player or no VCR, and you certainly ain't no dog, which means you can learn things. You're an updated computer you're a computer that's able to receive updates and learn new things, and to also teach new things. But the question is whether you want to do it or not. See, because if you're not learning new things, if you're not learning to be different, if you're not learning your mistakes, if you're not adjusting to the time, what you're becoming is obsolete. And what's obsolete, we don't keep. Think about it. How many of you got VCRs in your house right now? How many of you got DVD players? Better yet, how many of you got Blu-ray players? I mean, why do we have those things? See, because it started with VHS, then it went to DVD, then it went to Blu-ray, now we're streaming. We don't even have CDs anymore. CD players are obsolete. It's obsolete technology. Well, the older people got flip phones, but most of us don't even have flip phones. We now have these camera phones that are computers, cameras, does everything all in one. And having a separate camera now is obsolete. You got tablets now. For the most part, laptops are now obsolete. You are a technology that's able to adjust and adapt. But you got to understand your learned behavior that you're teaching people that you learn is the reason we got bad relatives and bad families. But you're able to change that. So how do we change it? Now we're going to get to part 2. How do we change our behavior?